Welcome to the Bookworm Duo, where we explore a variety of books so you can find your next read. Let's get started.
Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into this 2024 novel Hours by Phillip B. Williams.
Yeah.
And trust me, this is not your typical historical fiction.
It's a really fascinating blend of realism and those magical elements, and it's set in post-emancipation America.
Right.
It explores what freedom truly means for a community of formerly enslaved people.
Yeah, and the setting itself is almost a character.
Hmm.
Williams drops us right into Ours, this town in Missouri that was originally called Graysville.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the white residents fled a plague
Right.
and ended up selling their properties to black people, but at these inflated prices,
Yeah.
really highlighting the exploitation even during a crisis.
Yeah, the name Ours is so powerful, because it signifies this shift in ownership, but it also sets up the central question of the novel.
Right.
What does it mean for these characters to build a life and a community in a place that was literally bought and paid for? Totally. It's not just about land, though, is it?
Right.
There's this whole layer of magical realism. And at the heart of it is Saint, this conjurer, who's just shrouded in mystery.
Saint is absolutely key to the story. She leads this group of formerly enslaved people to Missouri,
Right.
and her conjure abilities are almost like a shield,
Yeah.
protecting them on their journey. But what's interesting is that Saint isn't a straightforward hero. She's powerful, but also emotionally detached. And she refuses to lead in a traditional sense. It's like she's given them the tools for freedom, but the rest is up to them.
Right, and that makes her so much more compelling than just like a benevolent figurehead.
Right.
And speaking of compelling, let's talk about some of the other characters
Yeah.
who make Ours come alive. I was particularly drawn to Miss Love and Miss Wife. They're partners, but their experiences of freedom are so different.
Their dynamic perfectly illustrates how freedom can be both personal and communal. Miss Love thrives, opening a bakery where her creations are almost magically attuned to what people need. It's like she's feeding not just their bodies, but their souls. Miss Wife, on the other hand, struggles because he longs for the purpose that work provided, even though in this community, work isn't a necessity.
Yeah, it's almost like he needs that structure to feel truly free. And then there's King and Honor, who are deeply in love, but their story is marked by tragedy.
The loss of their son, Justice, casts a long shadow over the novel. It's a reminder that even in a place intended as a haven, there's this underlying tension, a sense that the past isn't easily escaped.
Yeah, speaking of Justice, he becomes a really pivotal character.
Yeah.
He carries this literal brand from slavery, a constant physical reminder of what he's endured.
And that brand becomes a symbol not just of his own pain, but of the collective trauma that lingers even in freedom.
Right.
His anger and grief are so raw, and they erupt when he confronts Saint, blaming her for his parents' death.
Oh, that confrontation is so intense. It really highlights how the legacy of slavery continues to shape the lives of these characters, even as they try to build something new.
Yes.
And it's not just the emotional scars. There are these supernatural elements woven throughout the story, adding another layer of complexity.
Exactly. The magical realism in Ours isn't just window dressing. It really amplifies the themes of power, memory, and trauma. Take the scalp that appears in a tree.
Yeah.
It's a chilling omen, a reminder of the violence that has haunted these characters.
Right.
And continues to threaten their newfound freedom.
Yeah. There's also Abba,
Yeah.
who burns down Saint's house. A shocking act of rebellion.
He represents the fear and anger that simmer beneath the surface. It's not just about the physical danger. Abba embodies the distrust, the suspicion that any moment, everything they've built could be taken away.
It's like even in Ours, there's this constant tension
Right.
between hope and fear, a sense that the past is never truly gone. And that brings us to another important element, the role of memory. We see how Saint's memories are fragmented, impacting her actions, her relationships.
What's fascinating is that memory itself becomes a source of conflict. Saint's fractured recollections, coupled with the reliance on oral history, mean that the past is constantly being reshaped, interpreted through individual lenses.
Right.
This raises the question, how do you build a shared future when the understanding of the past is so subjective?
I'm thinking about how this connects to something you mentioned earlier, the idea that freedom is a process, not a destination.
Right.
It's not just about breaking physical chains.
Yeah.
It's about confronting these psychological and emotional scars that linger.
Precisely. And Ours makes it clear that those scars are not just individual, they're woven into the fabric of the community. shaping their relationships and their understanding of the world.
It's such a rich and complex exploration of what it means to be free. And we're just getting started. There are two new characters, Francis and Joy, who arrive in ours, adding another layer of intrigue. But I think that's a perfect place to pause
Yeah.
and pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
I agree. There's so much more to unpack, especially how these new arrivals impact the delicate balance of ours and what their presence reveals about the true cost of freedom.
We left off with the arrival of these two new characters, Francis and Joy.
Yeah.
And what struck me about them is that they bring their own baggage and
Absolutely.
complexities to ours,
Yeah.
almost embodying those external forces that have been lurking at the edges.
Francis has this mysterious connection to Saint, a shared past that isn't immediately clear, and then Joy arrives carrying a lot of pain and anger. She's a stark contrast to Selah, one of the twins, who has these healing abilities.
Yeah, it feels like their arrival is a catalyst
Yeah.
for a lot of the tension that's been building up in ours.
It certainly escalates things. The scalp in the tree was this unsettling foreshadowing, and then we see these acts of violence that become more and more disturbing.
Right.
The snake attack on Justice's family, so surreal and horrifying,
Right.
and then Abba burning down Saint's house.
Right.
These events create a sense of fear and paranoia in the community.
Yeah, it makes you question if ours can really be the safe haven they hoped for. And it's not just about external threats, right? There are these internal conflicts that start to bubble up.
Exactly. We see Justice wrestling with his rage, not just toward Saint, but toward the community itself. He feels alienated, like he doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And that internal struggle reflects the larger question of what it means to build a community in the aftermath of such profound trauma.
It's like they're trying to create this new world, but the ghosts of the past keep creeping in.
Yeah.
And the magical realism really intensifies, almost mirroring that heightened sense of danger.
The supernatural elements become more prominent as the story unfolds. Saint's behavior gets more erratic, her memories bleeding into the present. And then there are the twins, Selah, with her healing powers, and Naima, who unintentionally inflicts harm.
It's fascinating how those contrasting abilities reflect the duality of freedom. It can be both liberating and dangerous, empowering and destructive. What happens with Naima is so unsettling.
Right.
It's like even in a place designed for healing, there's this potential for things to go terribly wrong.
It speaks to the idea that power itself is complex. It can be used for good or for ill, intentionally or unintentionally.
Right.
And in Naima's case, it highlights the unintended consequences that can arise even when intentions are good.
It's like this dark undercurrent that runs through the story.
Yeah.
You think you're in this idyllic place,
Right.
but there's always this sense of unease, a feeling that things could fall apart at any moment.
And that's what makes the story so compelling.
Right.
Williams doesn't shy away from those dark elements. He forces us to confront the reality that even in freedom, there are still challenges, still dangers.
Yeah.
And it's those challenges that ultimately define the characters and shape the story.
It's like a pressure cooker. All these internal and external forces pushing against each other, leading to this climactic confrontation, an attack on ours that tests the very foundation of the community.
And what's interesting is that even amidst the chaos and violence, we see glimpses of resilience. Selah's healing abilities offer a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's still the potential for restoration.
Right, and it's not just Selah. There's a sense of community that shines through, a determination to protect what they've built. But this attack, it feels like a turning point in the story. Everything changes after that.
It definitely marks a shift. Ours is never the same after that attack, both literally and figuratively.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that even as the dust settles, Williams doesn't offer easy answers or a neat resolution.
Right.
He leaves us with these lingering questions about the nature of freedom, the legacy of trauma, and the possibility of healing.
It's like he's inviting us to grapple with those questions alongside the characters. And this is where Francis's journey becomes so crucial.
Right.
Her search for answers about her past, her connection to Saint.
Yeah.
It's like she's trying to piece together the missing pieces of a puzzle. And those pieces hold the key to understanding not just her own story, but the story of ours itself.
Her quest for knowledge becomes a metaphor for the reader's journey.
Right.
We're constantly trying to make sense of the fragmented memories, the competing narratives, and the enduring impact of the past.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that history is never static. It's constantly being reshaped and reinterpreted through individual perspectives.
And that brings us back to the question of how do you build a shared future?
Right.
When the understanding of the past is so subjective, it feels like there's a lot riding on Frances's discoveries.
Yeah.
They could either bring clarity or further complicate the already fragile web of relationships in ours.
Exactly. Her findings have the potential to either heal old wounds or open new ones. And as we head into the final part of our deep dive, that tension is palpable. The fate of ours, both as a physical place and an idea, hangs in the balance.
We've been talking about how ours is this really powerful exploration of freedom
Right.
and the legacy of trauma. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the ending.
Yeah.
It's not your typical happily ever after, is it?
It's definitely not tied up with a neat bow.
Yeah.
The ending of ours is more like an open question. It prompts us to consider what comes next for these characters and this community that has endured so much.
We see the aftermath of the attack, and ours is forever changed.
Right.
There's a sense of loss, but also this resilience that shines through.
Yeah.
And then there's Saint's house. It reappears almost miraculously.
Right.
But she chooses to leave,
Yeah.
walking away from the community she helped create.
That departure is so symbolic. It raises the question, is she abandoning them, or is this some kind of final act of conjure, setting them truly free?
Right. It's like she's recognizing that true freedom can't be given. It has to be earned.
Right.
They have to find their own way forward without relying on her protection or guidance.
Exactly. Her absence forces the community to confront their own internal conflicts, to grapple with the question of who they are without her.
Right.
And it's not just about Saint. The ending highlights how individual stories continue to unfold.
Yeah.
Even amidst the collective trauma, we see justice finding a different kind of community, one built on shared experiences rather than shared history.
And the twins, they're still grappling with their powers, trying to understand the responsibility that comes with such gifts. Even Thylius, who chooses to stay in the ruins of Saint's house, represents this determination to hold on to the past,
Right.
even as everything around him changes.
Those individual journeys are so important because they underscore the idea that healing and growth happen on multiple levels.
Right.
There's the collective healing of the community, but there's also the individual process of coming to terms with the past.
Right.
And finding your own place in the world.
It's like even though ours as a physical space is shattered, the spirit of community, the desire for connection persists.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about the power of storytelling.
Right.
How sharing experiences, both painful and joyful, helps these characters make sense of their world.
Absolutely. Storytelling becomes this vital act of resilience. It allows them to piece together fragmented memories, to honor their history, and to imagine new possibilities for the future. It's like even without the physical haven of ours,
Right.
the act of telling their stories keeps their spirits alive.
It's a beautiful and heartbreaking message, and it stays with you long after you finish the book.
Yeah.
Williams doesn't offer easy answers, but he gives us so much to think about.
Right.
The complexities of freedom, the weight of history, the power of community.
It's a novel that challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we live in. And in doing so, it opens up a space for dialogue, for reflection, and for a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
I couldn't agree more. It's a story that's both timely and timeless.
Right.
And I have a feeling it will resonate with our listener on a deeply personal level.
I'm sure of it.
Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to our channel for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, and we will see you on the next episode.